Hello everyone, so moving over to video number 2 now. So I kind of really want to carry on talking about where I left off really in the last video. So when I was talking about empathy and autism, and I was talking about autistic self-state and identification with objects over people in the last video, and how obviously that can then sort of reduce your empathy because you're kind of a bit more like cut off from other people, and how that can then be misinterpreted as a sign that you don't care, when it's not that you don't care, it's just that you find it very hard to connect with other people because you're not getting that sort of emotional feedback. It's like you've got a wall up. I know that some of the earlier autistic writings actually described it as almost a bit like being in a box, like behind a window. It's like you've got a window up, like a shield, like a bit like you're in a box, like there's a screen up, and the sort of emotional currents coming from other people, like a bit like sort of Wi-Fi, aren't meeting you because there's like this screen. So yeah, not. Some of them might get through the screen, but you might just get kind of little kind of fragments coming through. And then of course you find it hard to kind of decode what's coming through, and the end result is obviously a reduction in the ability to empathise. The other thing I wanted to say as well is that with regards to the perspective taking side of things, which is the theory of mind element of empathy, I find it very, very hard to take on board other perspectives. So if I have a point of view, an opinion about something, I find it very, very hard to accommodate someone else's point of view if I feel my opinion to be right. I'm not very good in an argument, basically. Well, I can't argue very well. Because I can't really back down. If I think something's right and the other person's saying it's not right for them, I find it very, very hard to see their perspective. Because if to me something feels wrong and something is wrong for me, I find it very hard to understand why someone else would see it as right. I think the way I've learned how to deal with this as I've got older, which shows obviously I have developed, is, and like I said, I don't completely lack theory of mind. I have enough theory of mind to have some idea about what I shouldn't do around other people, which I've kind of learnt as I've got, intellectually as I've got older. I know, although I can't understand someone else's perspective and I can't really see things from their side and I can't compromise very well, and I'll always feel that they're wrong and I'm right, and I can't really find a middle ground. I know I have enough nous now to know when to back down. So I don't want to kind of offend other people, I don't want to upset other people, and if that person is someone I like enough, and I really don't want to avoid, and I really want to avoid conflict, and I don't want to kind of, basically some things are just not worth fighting over, put it that way. And I will think, okay, well, I don't agree with them, I feel that they're wrong, I wish I could see things my way, I can't really compromise or see things their way, but I'm just not going to bother pushing this one, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's not that important, and if I do end up pushing it, it might just offend them, and I don't want to offend people, because obviously, like I said before, just because I struggle with empathy doesn't mean I don't care, and I don't want to upset people, and I don't want to offend people. So yeah, it depends also, of course, how much it means to me, though. If something does mean a lot to me and it's like a personal issue, then I'll find it a hell of a lot easier to back down, because then what happens is emotions get in the way. And when emotions get in the way, and by the way, I have a lot of feeling, just because I struggle with emotions and feelings doesn't mean I don't have feelings. I have a lot of feelings, it's just I don't know what to do with them. I'll then sometimes end up obsessively and repetitively trying to prove the other person wrong, and I'll find it very, very hard to back down in those circumstances. So that can happen if the issue in question affects me personally. If it doesn't affect me personally, and I still can't see things from their point of view, but it doesn't affect me personally, and I'm more prepared to let go because it's more intellectual and less emotional, then I'll try and back down, even though I still cannot see things from their perspective, just because I don't want to have an argument. But if it actually affects me, and it's something the other person has said about me, which is not true, I will want to I will carry on, basically. I won't, it's like a dog with a bone. I will carry on proving them wrong until they've backed down, or at least apologised, because it can get me into a bit of hot water at times. But yeah, and obviously it depends how much. It depends on the circumstances, obviously. But yeah, I do find it very, very difficult to perspective take and to basically accommodate other people's views on topics. It's a bit like, I guess, with the neurodiversity movement thing. Like, I am very against the neurodiversity movement, and I find it very, very hard to understand why anyone would like the neurodiversity movement. And I'm afraid I just can't empathise with their perspective, because to me, their perspective is wrong. But like I said before, I won't carry on. There's no point carrying on arguing with them, because I might like them as people, essentially, and there might be other parts of them that I do like. It's just I think they're wrong around that particular area. And for the sake of getting along with people, I have learned over time that it's just not worth kind of arguing over something. Sometimes it's just best to agree to disagree, basically. And that's what I've learned as I've got older as well. It doesn't come easy to me, but it is important at times to learn to agree to disagree. Because there's no point just carrying on over something that, and particularly when they're not prepared to back down either. And that's the other issue with autism, by the way, is that I think for all the stuff that the neurodiversity people go on about having loads and loads of empathy, they prove the point that autistics struggle with empathy when they themselves cannot refuse to see my perspective. So it works both ways, basically. I can't see their perspective, they can't see my perspective. Perspective taking, theory of mind. We're not good at it, autistics, that's just a fact. It always makes me laugh when these neurodiversity people go on about having theory of mind when they blatantly cannot understand my perspective, just like I can understand their perspective. But yeah, I do want to share one instance of when I was at primary school, just to highlight to you some of the difficulties historically I've had with knowing how to get on with people. And so when I remember this incident very, very clearly, bearing in mind I was very young, and I have grown up and I don't do this anymore. This was when I was still a child. I was about, I was in year 2, so I would have been about 6. And there was a group of girls that I sort of wanted to, I don't quite know what I wanted actually, but there was a group of girls and they were all standing together in a circle. One of them had brought a book into school, and it was a favourite book of hers. She'd been showing everyone in the class this book. It was a really nice book, a prized possession. She brought it into school, and she had been busy showing everyone in the class this book. And at lunchtime, this group of girls were standing around together, about 6 years old at the time, in year 2, standing around together, looking over this book. And I wanted to kind of join in. So I kind of went over to the group, but there wasn't really a way in which I could join in, because the group was kind of sandwiched together. So I kind of grabbed the book and I basically just tore a little bit of a page. And I don't know really why I did it, whether or not I was trying to, I wanted to play with them, or whether or not I wanted to be let into the group or whatever, but I just tore a tiny little bit of a page. Not massively tore it, it was just like a tiny little tear. Anyway, obviously, the girl got very upset about this, because it was her book, and she went over to a teaching assistant. She told the teacher assistant what I'd done. The teacher assistant told me to stay away from the group. Did I stay away? No, I went back, and I tore the page again. So she went back to the teaching assistant, asked me to stay away. Did I stay away? No, I went back again, and I tore the book again. This was the final straw. Basically, the teaching assistant got an older girl, who might have been, I don't know, year 5 or year 6, to take me down to the head teacher for what I had done. So I was taken down to the head teacher. I started crying at this point. I remember crying, but I was crying because I was terrified of the head teacher, and because I didn't want to be told off, because head teacher was quite scary. She took me to the head teacher's office, and the head teacher obviously gave me a talking down, told me off, and obviously told the teacher, my teacher, what had happened. And then after lunch, while everyone else in the class was watching TV, I had to sellotape the torn page back together again. The next day, I was in the playground and I noticed my mum was chatting to the teacher in the classroom, because my mum used to come into the school to help kids with their reading. Like, she volunteered at the school, and I saw my mum chatting to the teacher in the classroom. I was outside in the playground, but I could see through the door them talking to each other, and I knew, obviously, put two and two together, that the teacher was telling my mum what had happened. Oh no, I knew I was going to get told off later on that day. Sure enough, when my mum picked me up from school, walking down, yes, I remember this very, very clearly, walking down the passage down from the school, my mum was telling me off. Why did you tear that girl's book? You mustn't do that. That is not the way you behave, you know. How would you like it if your book had been torn and so on? Yeah, kept on telling me off. I remember all the way down the high street, as we walked past the Army and Navy, as it was when the Army and Navy still existed. Walking past the Army and Navy down the high street, my mum was telling me off, shouting at me all the way uptown. And she was still shouting at me, telling me off at bedtime. Still telling me off. Yeah, I got a right old talking to. But this example, I think, sort of shows the problems with empathy at that age. That I didn't know that it wouldn't be nice. I couldn't understand. I couldn't see from the girl's perspective. Obviously, I wouldn't like my book being torn. I didn't understand why. I couldn't see from her perspective. I couldn't empathise with her, and I didn't feel upset about it afterwards. I was upset because I'd been told off, and I hated being told off. That's what made me upset. But I didn't have any empathy for the girl. Now, what has happened is, as I've got older, that situation has changed. Now, it would never cross my mind to do something like that. That would be awful. I can empathise now. I know that you mustn't do that to someone's precious belongings. I can reason. I wouldn't like it. They wouldn't like it. I have empathy now to know that that is not acceptable. And I would also feel upset if I'd accidentally done it to someone. One time in a meltdown, that did happen, by the way. I actually tore one of my mum's books, not because I wanted to, but because I was in meltdown. And then afterwards, I felt really remorseful and upset about what I'd done. But that shows how, basically, as I got older, I developed empathy and showed, basically that I've developed. But what I wanted to say, that is an example of autistic self-state and how that manifested at the age of 6 years old. So, thank you for watching.